Welcome everyone. We will give our attendees just a few minutes to join. But while attendees are joining, I'm a little bit frozen. I think it's my Wi-Fi today. Sorry about that, everyone, but I'm here. While we're waiting for attendees to join, we're gonna ask David and Alex a fun little opener question just to get everyone ready to go and get them introduced to the community. So let's see. Regardless of COVID, because I know that places are closing and opening back up and everything's confusing, but where are you most excited to travel to next? David, why don't you go first?
Well, I'm most excited to travel on a workation that we're planning for mid-November to Miami. So we're going to take our team, get together, have a little team building, team bonding, and some good times. I hear some axe throwing maybe in the future. So interested in trying that out.
How fun, I love that. Alex, what about you?
So I'm most looking forward to going back to Australia. I think I did study out there a long while ago, but since the pandemic, I don't know, I've been sitting here thinking I can't wait for them to open back up. I think they're closing down a little bit, but when they're up and open, I'm definitely going back there.
Awesome, I love that.
Where do you like to go when you go there?
So I did the East Coast last time, but I really want to go check out the West Coast. That seems to be, and ideally get over to New Zealand, but main priority is to go over towards Perth and see the sort of more of the landscape that way, and ideally travel into the centre. That would be the best part in the outback.
That's what we did. We want to go to the Red Rock next time we go as well, right there dead center. But we did the East Coast. We did, my wife and I went to Sydney, then Brisbane, a day trip in Brisbane, 2 days in Sydney, 3 days in Cairns, and like the Emerald Coast, and then back to Sydney. It was absolutely one of a lifetime experience, and dying to go back.
So you're more of a bottom up, whereas I was a top down. I started at Cairns and then worked my way down to Brisbane and then Sydney. Yeah, we had the rivalries as we passed.
Yeah.
Well,
good deal.
That sounds like an amazing trip, but I know everyone is joining, not for the travel tips, but for the outbound sales tips. So let's go ahead and dive right into the content. Today's event, before we get into it, is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. And for those of you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission is to create an environment for our 20,000 and growing members to answer questions they'd otherwise struggle to solve on their own, and help them see around corners they may not know about. We do this through great live sessions like what you're about to see today, through a robust online forum, and in the near future, in-person events, hopefully. Those of you who weren't previously admitted, you should now have access to the community. And if you don't hesitate to drop our team a note via modernsaleshq.com. So enough about MSP. I'm going to pass it over to David to say a little bit about Outplay, who's our amazing sponsor for today.
Thank you. First and foremost, happy Halloween. Just kidding. Dorky thing. I'm a dad. I can be excused for that. But here at Outplay, for those of you that don't know us, first and foremost, thank you, Modern Sales Pros. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Alex, for joining. Here at Outplay, our objective and mission is pretty simple and straightforward. We want to help you book more meetings with a truly multi-channel sales engagement platform. What that translates to is getting the best return on time, energy, investment for any time spent prospecting, and making it easier for managers and leaders like you to better lead and guide your teams and clone your top reps and scale and ramp them quickly.
Awesome. That was short and sweet. I think we have a new record for that elevator sponsor pitch slide. People have a new standards to uphold too. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive into introductions. I'm going to pass it over to Alex to kick us off.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Alex Austin. I work at Media Effect, and I'm the Director of Global Business Development here. And so what that means basically is I work managing sales teams, and whether that's internally or we work with our clients, working with their sales directors and their marketing teams and kind of synchronizing the two together to make their sort of outreach and their inbound efforts fully maximized, integrating tools like Outplay or Outreach or other variations of sales enablement and also social selling. David?
David?
Yes. So, hello again. Thought I froze for a second, didn't you? Gotcha. So David Youngblood here, senior sales and partner manager with Outplay. What that means is I get to contribute to both direct sales efforts as well as work with amazing partners like Alex and many others of you out there. And so here today to help contribute, make Alex look like a rock star. Won't be hard. He's pretty amazing. Really just have fun.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, David. And then I'm Hannah White. I'm part of the Modern Sales Pros team. So I'm behind the scenes making sure the community puts on awesome content for all of its members. And then really excited to dive in today. I know Outplay is our sponsor, but we're also going to dive into what outbound selling signals David and Alex are specifically using. So there's going to be a lot of tactical takeaways from today's conversation. We're actually going to be talking about what's changed about outbound selling. What are the most essential signals related to outbound selling? How can you integrate these signals into your outbound motion in a data-driven way? And tactical things you can do right after this call to get started executing right away. And I have to say, I do love the title of this event. Outbound sales is like dating, don't miss the signals. It's true. I think we've all struggled with either or, especially those in the revenue discipline. So excited to dive into today's content. One housekeeping note before we get started is please use the Q&A panel. I've disabled chat for attendees, but that's just because you're able to comment and upvote on others' questions in the Q&A panel. So the Q&A panel is meant to be really engaging here. We would love for you guys to participate there. Keep asking questions. I'll pepper them in throughout. David and Alex chatting through their talking points, and just excited to see what you guys have to say. And then, as always, the session will be recorded. I'll follow up approximately 1 to 2 hours after the event and get everyone the recording. So don't worry, if there's an awesome tidbit of information you want to share back with your team, you'll be able to. So with that, are you guys ready to dive into the content today?
Yeah, let's go.
Awesome. I love it.
Let's do this.
So let's talk about outbound and the changes associated with it. So David, I would love to hear first about like how are you defining outbound within your org?
Yeah, so outbound is, as we know, has changed a little bit. It's had to evolve and adapt as it tends to, and it's headed virtual, right? Or mostly, as is the rest of the world. So sales orgs everywhere having to adjust, experiment, try and define and find new ways to go about targeting their audience and getting their time and attention on the calendar. And so gone are the days are kind of door knocking and feet in the streets, and increased opportunities for us to adapt and evolve and leverage new tools and tech, things like Outplay, right, to get in front of your buyers.
Definitely. I'd actually also love to learn a little bit more about your guys' outbound selling motion within Outplay.
Yeah, for sure. So, for us, we are, we have a global team primarily based through US and India, and we're really prospecting everywhere, right? There's nobody that's not a potential fit. As long as you got a salesperson that's got time on the calendar to prospect, we want to help you out. And so, our model is very much a heavy blended approach to outbound and of course inbound lead follow-up, and leveraging the sequencing tool, sales engagement platform of Outplay to follow up with those prospects, right? To make sure that we are, very timely in our follow-up and very thorough in our outreach. Ratio-wise, we're 5 to 6 BDRs to AE ratio right now because we're in hyper growth mode due to the Series A funding. So we have a very, very aggressive outbound model today.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Alex, do you want to tell us a little bit about your guys' outbound selling motion? And then also, where do you think outbound's headed?
Yeah, so I think for us predominantly, a lot of our outbound selling is focused towards utilizing what David said, the online models with webinars, attendees, We find those to be quite engaging, and it gives you the ability to sort of prioritize those that attend for the whole session or attend for half, those that just registered, and then anybody else who may have not done, and sharing out the content to make it really worthwhile. We now focus more around sort of multi-channel selling using platforms like Outplay, even internally, but then also integrating with others like Skylead, for example, which automates a lot of this, social selling of LinkedIn, adding connections, messages, and putting in those sort of channels and streams to really maximize out all routes within your outbound efforts for sales reps. Hannah, I think you're
Sorry
on
about
mute.
that. I was muted. I know. Thank you. It wouldn't be a Zoom webinar if it didn't happen at least once. So thanks for the perspective there from both of you. So David, I think a little bit in the prep session, we talked about technology. It's no longer a nice to have, but a need to have. Do you want to dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, really a lot of the times when working with clients or customers and even talking to friends and peers in the space, it comes down to three things for me ultimately: people, process, and technology, right? So hire, find, and train the right people, establish and build out your process, and then of course have the correct technology and all the technology that you would need, right? So before spreadsheets and things like that, making things tedious and arduous, it's just not very effective. So sales organizations are, of course, coming to terms with accepting that there are new and additional tools that they need in the tech stack, and they have to go through these additional buying cycles and evaluation cycles to find the right tools to set their team up for success. So it's a requirement, right? It's not just a nice to have.
Definitely. Alex, do you have any perspective on that?
So I think it's more around, along with David, but it's those sort of engagement signals and really sort of tracking what's working and then selling solutions and results. Selling results to solutions. I think people are more interested in how it's going to impact them in whatever it is that you're offering. What am I going to get from that? And therefore, how can I implement that essentially today or within the next few in order to make the business more successful for them? So any sort of relevant case studies to that specific market or that specific company as an account would be really worthwhile. And that's what I found with our sort of outbound efforts that seem to be received really well with clients.
Awesome. And then I know this was an RSVP question, so I'd love to ask you guys. It may be obvious to some, but not everyone. So how does outbound differ from inbound, specifically related to prospecting? David, do you want to take on that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So outbound versus inbound as it pertains to prospecting typically means that when you're building a prospecting initiative, right, and you're building the workflows associated to inbound lead process and outbound prospecting efforts, it's going to vary case by case by company, organization, team, your target audience and verticals, of course. But the larger theme of truth is that inbound is about timing, right? The speed to action in following up in that first touch point. So being able to automate that first step of communication really, really helps. And then being able to support that with follow-up correspondence with typically engagement by a user or prospector, really helps add to the conversion rates and success rates of processing inbound lead workflow. Whereas outbound, typically is more like wide net canvas, scattershot approach, right? Leveraging omni-channel, going after phone, email, et cetera. And it's really about focusing on the target accounts that you want to, have a meeting with, someone that can make or influence a buying decision rather than just somebody that raises their hand. And so as a general rule of thumb, outbound approach, you're able to be more targeted and get into accounts that potentially have more value and matter more, but the trade-off is a longer sales cycle typically, and but also a higher conversion rate, right, in terms of converting accounts or opportunities that matter. Whereas inbound, sometimes hand raisers are not really a good fit, right? We all know that. We've all been there. We've all been a salesperson or been a marketer that's heard a salesperson complain about, poor quality leads, et cetera. And so that's why it's important to have, that dual approach rather than just one way.
Definitely. Alex, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, David hit the nail on the head there, really. I think predominantly with inbound is you've got some intel there. And as they were saying, you can automate some streams based on that prospect's journey to becoming what you'd call an inbound lead. And so whether that's from an asset or whether that's from a webinar, and then you can put that through a CRM, you can put it into a sales enablement platform, and then you can tailor that journey that you're going to guide them down based on the information that you've got. Outbound, you don't really have much of that. You may have some slight, research on technologies they may use or different set of verticals, but really a lot of that journey is finding that intel in order to sort of direct the content and direct the nurture streams appropriately to those prospects. So you really want to tailor that. So by finding out these signals and finding out these insights, and does it receive well in this market that they like white papers and they like more informational stances, or do they actually want to be more interactive? Do they want to actually go to in-person events or do things online? And then really sort of tailoring that outbound approach to make it work for you.
Definitely. And then we've had a couple live questions come in. Tim from Flytix is asking, David, you said you have 5 to 6 BDRs per AE. Does that fill the AE pipeline 100% with outbound leads, or do they also work new inbound leads?
Yeah, phenomenal question. Thanks for asking. So we actually have a subset team, right? Another team that helps process the inbound leads. As mentioned, time is everything. So they're doing inbound lead follow-up. So we've kind of devised the labor between the teams because it allows the team members to be more focused in their effort. What I've experienced historically, over the years, is that if you have the hybrid approach model, what often happens is the reps tend to favor the inbound because it's easier to book a meeting with. But really by separating the workflows for the resources, then you can mitigate that risk.
Awesome, thanks for that. And then Alex, an anonymous attendee has asked, with outbound changing, how are you finding reaching people via phone with many employees work from home?
Yeah, very difficult. I think a lot of people will agree that they're facing the same struggle. And the pandemic's just highlighted something that I think was already coming in the making. And that's finding out what works best for the prospects that you're trying to target. So putting in a multi-channel touchpoint stream using the emails, the phones, and the social selling aspects. The next step is door knocking, and you can't really be doing that. So you really want to find out, okay, so if this person's opening my emails more, I probably want to tailor that stream to be more email focused. And it's all on an and if, what if basis. If they don't open any emails, but then I'm going to add them to more of a social automation stream. And likewise, I'm going to throw in the calls along the way, because with that, that's still a good way of doing things. At the end of the day, you're trying to initiate that conversation. That's your end goal before you arrange some sort of meeting. So you really want to make sure they're aware of who you are while you're reaching out to them. And that if you do end up speaking on the phone, by chance of the secrets that you're following, that they are aware of who you are and they remember the information that you've shared. And that's got to be the challenging thing. Make what you're saying really impactful and worthwhile reading. Make it interesting and fun. Don't keep it boring and plain. Otherwise, it's just going to go in the pile of other information that no one remembers reading.
Definitely. And then Rachel, I think I am reading your question correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong. Pop through with another question. Rachel's asking, what is the best platform for intent data? David, do you want to take this one? What do you use?
So here at Outplay, we'll go ahead and say here publicly, we leverage Seamless, Lucia, and LinkedIn Sales Navigator, as well as Slintel. So we're very aggressive in our approach to gather the data and leverage information. The one point I would add to the work from home struggles is that one of those names I mentioned has a lot of mobile numbers somehow. So we're actually getting through and seeing some pretty good connect rates, even in this work from home world that we're in. But furthermore, just another note on that, businesses are still businesses, so they still have to survive. So they still have to communicate, which means that a lot of those business numbers should be forwarding to, even if it didn't feel like it as a prospector at times, the mobile number or a way to get to a VoIP phone on the desktop of the work from home employee. So the messages, the calls are getting through. I think it's oftentimes our team may make or feel like it's an excuse that everybody's working remote and I can't get connects, but that's a perspective issue, and that can be resolved through, you know, persistence and coaching.
Totally. I mean, as a consumer and consumer of a lot of technologies, because I'm a marketer, I have been getting a lot of calls on my mobile phone since the pandemic started. Alex, do you have any perspective here, or can you share what intent data tools you guys are using?
Yeah, so Tech Target, it's a priority engine. That's really good for a third-party base, and they provide some great insights specifically around the sort of technology industry and what sort of solutions people are looking for, where they are in their decision making, and that's really, you know, we find that quite helpful. Another one for a sort of a first-party side is Sixth Sense that I found. I see that works really well. They've got some great tools. I think they've even got AI now implemented, which is helping predict people's decision making and buyer journeys so that you can target them at the right time, which has proven to be quite effective for some.
Wow, that's awesome. Talk about signals. That's a signal.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and move on to the next talking point, just because I know we've only got about 40 minutes left and looks like lots of live questions are coming in. So don't worry, we'll get to them. But we're going to talk about signals. That's what this whole webinar is supposed to be about, right? Don't lose sight of what really matters. We talked about this a lot in the prep session. David, do you want to dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, I mean, one of my big key points for, you know, the audience here in particular, especially, you know, the leaders out there, is don't lose sight of the metrics that really matter, right? At the end of the day, you know, what happens a lot of the times is we get lost in like the shiny objects with all these enhanced features and functionality and AI this and machine learning that. But, you know, at the beginning and the end of the day, the metrics that matters is revenue, right? So focus on revenue, work backwards from there. You know, meetings conversion rates from meetings booked, and then what does it take to get a meeting booked? Work it backwards from there. How many average, you know, touch points per prospect did it take to get a meeting? Is for your team? Is it 7? Is it 13? Do you know, right? And so you need to have visibility into the conversion metrics throughout the process, and then what you'll net some find out oftentimes is it's either a messaging problem, a process problem, a technology problem, or you know, your data problem, right? So that's what it comes down to. My 2 cents on signals.
Definitely. I think too, a good reminder here is that signals are almost like the last piece of the puzzle, and that entire workflow needs to be developed before you can get to like your buyer signals. So starting with revenue, like you said, reverse engineer it, and then signals are like the last piece of the puzzle. So if the rest isn't set up for success, then signals don't even matter. Alex, you talked a little bit about positive and negative signals in the prep session. Do you want to dive into that a little bit deeper?
Yeah, so I think the 3 main that I really look at is the positive, the negative, but also the assets as an entity themselves. So the positive signals is very much like David said, it's from that revenue backwards. And so what's led prospects to becoming, you know, a revenue for you, an opportunity? And so what journey did they take? Or what's the most common theme journeys? And how can you replicate those across the business? The negative signals is one I kind of like looking at a lot more, is where are your roadblocks from beginning up? So what are you doing at the initiation start of that journey? You know, are you targeting too hard with something like a webinar and not starting to make a bit softer? You know, is it the messaging that you're using in there? Is it the asset that you used at the beginning as opposed to using something more like a white paper, or maybe a case study would have been more beneficial? And then what are you doing to sort of try different ways of approaching that and correcting it? The other thing I also do now more so than not is the asset analysis. So where in all of our campaigns is this asset being used, and how well is it performing in others? And so does this asset perform well in another campaign that actually would work well in this campaign? Or does it not work well across the board? And should we refresh that? It also helps things like product marketing teams, making sure that their information that they're producing on the business is really worthwhile for sales and marketing to be utilizing and going out to market with.
Awesome. Something you said in the prep session that I really liked is that you said watching outbound selling signals is a lot like dating, as in like you don't want to overstep or push too hard. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Well, yeah, no, I think it's more about, you know, you don't want to go straight into conversation telling somebody all about you and who you are and what you like and what you do. You know, they may not be interested. in which you're more likely going to shoot yourself in the foot. And that information is going to spread across various people, and they're just going to remember you by that person who just talks about themselves. Whereas if you approach a conversation and finding out about someone and what their interests are, and trying to gain a little bit about their intentions on what you're trying to achieve, especially in the dating game, then you'll probably be more successful in listening than you would be talking, I've always thought.
Totally. Who knew you were coming for outbound selling advice today and you would also get dating advice?
I tried to link it into the title. That was what I was trying to do.
No, you did an awesome job, Alex.
Well played.
Yes, totally. I'm gonna go ahead and pepper some live questions that are coming in. So David, what is your opinion on FaceTime cold calling?
Good question. My personal preference is abso-freaking-lutely, like, why not? It's another touch point. It's another way of differentiating yourself as a prospector to stand out from the noise that your prospects are receiving other ways. Like, why wouldn't you do it? But I'm also very extroverted and don't get embarrassed easily. So that's me. But I would also then, of course, test and measure results, compare, contrast, and then refine from there.
Definitely. As someone who leans a little more introverted, at times that terrifies me, getting cold FaceTimes, but whatever works, right? That's the point of selling. Alex, do you have any perspective on that one?
What was the question?
How do you feel about FaceTime cold calling?
I mean, I don't do that personally. That's something that it's not really, contacting chief information officers and chief directors of technology is just, when you started FaceTiming them, I think they'd be more confused about who you were and why you were FaceTiming them about the information you're trying to probably share. So I would probably stick to the calls, and videos is really good as a way around that. I've seen a lot more come up, and doing analysis on a company and seeing the technology they use, and then sharing that information on a 2 or 3 minute video. Yeah, okay, there's going to be some who ignore it, but the ones that do respond well to that, and it shows that dedication, that time, and it's actually quite a nice gesture. It adds that human touch onto things. I've also noticed that when you book meetings now with, I think, Calendly, you can set a video as a response saying, thanks for booking this meeting with me, I really appreciate it. Here's some further assets that I think you'd find useful. And those sort of things are modernizing more and more, which I think are becoming more prominent.
Definitely. We've talked a lot in
I would like to.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going off script here, but I just wanted to pepper in and add to the point of video prospecting via FaceTime or the like. It shouldn't be your first touch point, right? You should have attempted more traditional approaches first, phone, email, social. But I think if it works for you, right, if you're open to it, then as a later step in your process or your sequence, then it can be a great addition, much like video prospecting.
Definitely. We've talked a lot about video prospecting in the modern sales pros community. There's a lot of content on in our content library. So go check that out if you're interested in video prospecting. There's some really good stuff. Raya has asked, can we ask, is it the right time to speak with you to prospects when we do cold calls? What do you guys think about that? Alex, why don't you take this one first?
There's never a good time, really. So I think your answer is probably going to be no, not now. I think, you can always highlight the fact, I know I've called you out of the blue and it may not be the right time, and then, initiate what it is that you want to talk about. And that instant response, someone will think, is this interesting to me or is it not? And then they'll be like, do you know what, I'm actually really busy right now, but can you call me back around this time and date? Or if they're like, actually, I've got 5 minutes, and people will manage their time accordingly on the prioritizations of things they've got to do. So you're new to their prioritization list. So you're probably not sitting up there at the moment, but you've got those 30 seconds or 15 seconds or so to really put yourself in the running for it. So yeah, don't ask the question, is now a good time? But recognize the fact that you've called them out of the blue is what I would say.
David, any perspective?
Absolutely. Actually, one of my passion points here, because it's that opener, it's that one shot, that one chance. And to quote someone from our space, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face, and the prospect actually answers the phone. You're like, oh crap, now what, right? And so then we kind of default to our autopilot, in the social etiquette, right, social contract we have to be considerate. Is now, a good time to speak with you? Or, would you mind sharing a minute or two with me? These are not good questions for prospecting. Prospecting isn't about, social contracts. Prospecting is about getting to the outcome, which is the meeting booked. And to Alex's point, starting the conversation now by acknowledging what it is and what you're doing. My favorite all-time opener is, "Hi, this is David from Outplay. I know you're busy and I probably caught you in the middle of something." And then shut up. It's an assumptive declarative statement. It forces a response in cognitive awareness from your prospect. And they have to stop what they're doing and process what you just said, because you weren't the autopilot cold caller that they're used to saying no to, right? So sometimes your process and your messaging can be your differentiator as much as your product, service, or solution.
I really like that, because you're like, hey, I know I'm annoying, but let's talk. And I mean, it does take, yes, 100%. Another anonymous question came in related to that. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark that answered. It's not good to ask, is now a good time to talk? Because you're giving them the opportunity to say no. So we're going to go ahead and dismiss that one.
Right.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. I know there's more questions coming in. Keep them coming. We'll get to them, I promise. So we wanted to talk about a little bit about integrating these signals into your motions. David, how do you integrate the processes around watching signals, identifying signals, measuring signals? Do you want to dive a little bit into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, understand for those listening, your world, your go-to-market approach, your messaging, right, who your ICP is, but it should be a crawl, walk, run, and then fly approach, right, for any company. To actually parrot what you'd mentioned earlier, Anna, everyone should be a little cautious to make sure they get the fundamentals in place first, the foundation in place first, people, process, technology, and then you can start to get into analysis mode instead of getting, early into analysis, and then you get into analysis paralysis because you don't have the right data, enough data, et cetera. So definitely a landmine to dodge there.
Definitely, that makes sense. Alex, what's your perspective here?
Yes, I think it's really dependent upon what your strategy is, your growth strategy around this. So is it, net new business? Are you expanding in the market, or are you expanding your product solution range, or are you looking to use resellers or MSPs, not modern sales pros, but managed service providers, otherwise known as. And so then you really want to tailor that to which the growth strategy is. So yeah, it's very dependent upon what you're looking to achieve. If you're doing net new business, then is this a new solution to somebody? Have they used it before? Do they work with one of your competitors? And therefore that tailors the amount of information you're sharing. You don't want to go into someone who may already work with a competitor and share information around, here's an introductory to this solution, because they'll be like, you don't even know me. And likewise as well, if someone's never used something like, say, third-party risk management, and they've not implemented that into a security strategy in their company, there's no point in going in with an analysis and a comparative guide between you and a competitor, because they're not even going to know what you're on about to even understand that information at that point. So it's very dependent upon where your growth strategy sits.
Definitely. I wanted to ask this RSVP question. It's taking a couple steps back, but what is a trigger event for outbound sales? Alex, do you want to take this one?
What is a trigger event for outbound sales? I think there are various things that people can do, right? So is it that they've engaged on something in terms of solutions? Have they recently joined a competitor, or did they sign a contract? Is there a certain event that they've attended in the past, or is there any sort of analysis that you've got on them? Is there the amount of research that you can get on these people, whether it's from a data source, or whether it's internal, or whether it's using something around LinkedIn and tools alike? There are certain things that crop up that can initiate your outbound. Even someone starting a new role in a company, and we know when we start new roles, we want to make impacts, we want to make changes. You could use something like that as a trigger event in order to initiate an outbound campaign and say, hey, look, we know that you recently started this role, and we thought this solution would really help you in achieving success. And then you could start from there.
Thanks for your perspective there. David, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I mean, I really feel like Alex honestly covered all the angles there. It's case by case, know your space, and analyze, rinse, wash, repeat. So
I like that rhyme. Case by case, know your space. That one's good. Awesome.
I made it up on the fly. It was like right now. I'm just that kind of guy. Sorry.
Definitely. It's a rhyming day for David. One more question I wanted to ask is, someone needs to start tackling the SDR element of their business, but they have no idea where to start. David, do you have any perspective there?
Yes, I do. Understand your people, your process, and your technology, right? So understand what your process is going to be, make sure you're hiring and finding the right people, and then of course have the appropriate tech to support it. As far as where to begin, start making a call, right? Go test everything, test your messaging, test your process, test your target ICP. So for a new team, right, establish goals, create some benchmarks, number of meetings per day per rep, right? Run it for a month, assess, adjust, and go forward from there, right? With an established organization, like if your team is established in it, you should have that macro data available, and it should be a course correction rather than a build from scratch, test and repeat.
Definitely. And I think that's a really good point here, is that the signals you're looking for that this whole webinar is about is literally any consumer or buyer activity is a signal. So like, how are you watching, adjusting, and acting on the data that you're collecting? Or if you're a more established org, like David said, what data do you already have that you can make decisions on? A couple of live questions that have come in. Rom would like to know the best day to reach people. Alex, do you have any perspective here?
I've always found a Thursday is good. I think people's excited for the weekend ahead. Monday's a no-go and Friday's a no-go, I've always found. Tuesdays, it's the beginning of the week, but it's what it is. And we call Wednesday hump day. It's just a day, so you're going to get answers probably. But I feel like Thursdays is really that time to, looking forward to the weekend. People are in a good mood. Most of the week's over. And that's when we find, for me personally, especially in specific markets, you find high engagement rates around a Thursday. So I would say that was the best day. Definitely not a Sunday or a Saturday, probably.
David?
Yeah, so oddly enough, I differ a little bit. So I will globally make the acceptance that Tuesday through Thursday would be marginally better than Monday and Friday, but I've read countless reports and countless studies that were conducted on this, right, across all kinds of experts and research firms. And, honestly, the most important component to prospecting is doing the work, right? At the end of the day, every time that you conduct an outreach attempt through whatever channel it is a branding impression you're making on your target buyer, right? Or somebody that can make or influence a buying decision, whether they forward it, pass it along, talk about it at the water cooler, or on the next Zoom meeting, because we don't go to water coolers anymore. But ultimately, it's making sure that your team can get through the work. And every time they pepper, even if they don't answer, right, or they leave a voicemail, that's a branding impression. And each time, even if you recycle account, say you run a full sequence, you've gone 8 weeks in, no responses, completely dark on you, and you recycle the account in 3 to 6 months, the next time you reach out, your brand is going to resonate more. So you're going to have a higher chance of conversion success and meeting booking rate. So I say do the work. Focus on that more than the excuse of today is not a good day to call, because that gets to be an excuse for a prospector. My 2 cents.
Definitely. In the community, we've been talking a lot about personalization. And if you're reaching out to someone and you actually know who you're selling to versus just like, oh, I'm selling to a VP of sales, but you actually know the person and the decisions they're going through and all these things, and it's always relatable because you're actually doing the work, like David said. Let's go ahead and move on to our final talking point. I have a feeling a lot of live questions are going to come through, so keep them coming. Tactical things that you can do right now. We talked a little bit about this in the prep session, but David, these first 2 bullet points are yours. You want to dive in a little bit more?
Yeah, so taking the first step is to do an evaluation or perform an audit of what your present state is, right? And so understanding where you're at, then you can benchmark and establish a plan for where you want to go. while I was talking ahead of myself before reading the bullet. You could start right now, right, on building the process and adding these tactics and strategies to your workflow, but you do have to know where you're coming from. You got to be able to compare, contrast, to see the relative comparison and how you improve.
Alex.
Let's see
Oh,
here.
go ahead, David, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you're right.
Oh.
I went ADD on you, and I went over to chat, and I was making sure there wasn't a question about what I said. So all good.
Oh no,
Alex,
you're good.
all yours.
Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the tactical things you can do right now, yeah, I'll do the second one before the first one. So, looking at your business growth strategy, you need to really get yourselves into the mindset about what information you're trying to look for, and are you recording that today? Because it's always a help today to help tomorrow kind of situation. So by doing a lot of tracking and putting those metrics in place, I find that really beneficial. And that really helps you with sort of the next point about when and where your customers are in their decision-making process. I feel like a lot of the time people do give hints and nudges around all this information, and some record it in an Excel file, some will record it in their notes, someone on a Word document, but you really want to have that somewhere captured in either your CRM or a sales enablement tool, so that you can then refine that pick list item to those that are looking in the next 6 months, 12 months, and then you can tailor your outbound or even inbound efforts really around that. So, first of all is kind of get yourselves into that data mindset of what you really want to track. And then the second thing is get out there and gather that information.
Awesome. I think those are both of your answers, David and Alex. Those are some awesome, very, very tactical takeaways that people can go get started on. I think a big thing here is just what signals are your buyers already projecting that you can get started on it. Relates very closely to David's auditing point. But we have some live questions coming in. So Alex, how do you face doorkeepers? Every time this person calls someone or their team calls someone, they never transfer their calls. So this is like an EA, receptionist, that type of thing. How do you get past them? How do you convince them?
Yes, we call them gatekeepers as well, same thing. So, I mean, a lot of the time is, unless they tell you otherwise, it's an email only, or they're no longer in the office, they're working from home, anything like that. I always put them into a more automated email social selling campaign. Obviously, if they say, let me try and transfer you through, and they don't, there's only so much you can do with the information that you have, and you record that last time. You're on the phone, you can still be doing other things, so that's not wasting your time, like using LinkedIn or finding another touch point to reach that prospect directly while that person's transferring the call. And another thing as well is using things like out of offices and sort of capturing that prospect's information, picking a time, ideally, luckily, if they're off on annual leave and you get an email, you might get their contact details, like a direct number. And also, like David was saying, finding those data sources that provide mobile numbers directly, I've always found beneficial. Depending on the time that you have to commit, I personally focus more on those mobile numbers, and any sort of office generic numbers I know are more likely to go towards a gatekeeper or such. But if I've got that time to really sort of home in on that, and I need to maximize, it's gone through more of an automated process, but I need to maximize out this lead or these sets of leads, then I would focus a little bit more on using those office numbers. But just make sure you're productive while they're putting you through. Otherwise, you're just going to be wasting your time.
Totally. David, anything you want to add there?
Absolutely. You're like hitting all my passion points today. This is awesome. As far as understanding doorkeepers and gatekeepers, the number one thing, in my biased opinion, is a paradigm shift of the prospector, right? And management, right? As far as leading the team, you have to change your mindset that they're not a gatekeeper or a doorkeeper. They are a tour guide waiting to give you a tour of the organization. And your objective is to treat them like a human being, converse with them with kindness, and then ask them the right questions that help them point and navigate you in the right direction. There's a lot of amazing content and best practices and messaging and scripting around this that's out there in the community. If you want some of my tidbits and best practices, feel free to ping me afterwards. But it's really the number one thing is a paradigm shift. It's not a gatekeeper, it's a tour guide. And because a lot of you out there, because of your industry, because of the verticals, because of who you're going after, like healthcare, for example, and we're B2G, you have to call these office numbers. There's no way around just going to mobile numbers, because those aren't remote workforces at this time, right? So you still got to know how to get to the proverbial gatekeeper and through them whenever you come across them in your outreach efforts.
Definitely. Another question that came in through RSVPs that I know we had some perspective on is how to increase the efficiency of targeting the right set of customers. Alex, any perspective there?
Yeah, it really starts with the data that you have on them and that search that you're conducting. So you really want to make sure that you personalize it as much as you possibly can to their role or their industry, similar businesses alike, technologies they may use, and really making sure that will set the strong foundations off for a good nurture stream. So to really make it efficient and worthwhile, it starts with how you're sourcing that information, and as much intent or as much data around them that you can get will set you up for at least the most success that you can probably achieve.
Awesome. David, anything you want to add there?
No, he's got it. Alex nailed it.
Perfect. Awesome. So David, because you didn't have an answer for that one, I'm gonna lay the next one on you. Which SDR metrics do you measure? At what stage should an AE take over the process?
Awesome. So another great question. Another depends type answer depending on your business and who you're going after and all those fun disclaimers. But by and large, overarching theme of key metrics for us at Outplay, it's round one KPs, right? Or the first step one. How many step ones a prospector added to their workflow today? Meaning, as a prospector, how many net new contacts did I add to a net new sequence for that contact today, right? So you want to have a good average number there, generally speaking, 30 to 45 as a rule of thumb, again, depending on your business. And then as far as other metrics, obviously the activity metrics, activities breed results. So make sure there's enough calls, enough emails, and those components going out. And then in terms of at what stage an AE should take over the process, again, it depends, but in my opinion, it's at the point that the meeting is booked and scheduled, right? So an AE should, in theory, be able to just start from that first meeting set and then work the sales process through the CRM from there.
Awesome. Alex, anything you want to add there?
No, I think I'll come back this one. I think you nailed it, David. I don't have anything really to add any value to that.
Awesome. A couple more, and I love the enthusiasm today. Alex, do voice messages work on a cold call? I personally avoid sending them, says this anonymous attendee.
Voice messages, do you mean as in leaving a voicemail, or do you mean just sending a direct voice message like you would on WhatsApp, for example?
I think like leaving a voicemail is what they meant.
Yeah, leaving a voicemail. I mean, I found it gives people more of a reason to not call you back than it does. So if they see an unknown number, people are intrigued as to who's this number, why they called me. I'm going to call that back and find out. Unless you know that person. But obviously, if you don't, then you say it's called for media effect, it's just another sales call. I'm not even going to bother calling them back. So I've always found it's not as good to leave them. But after you've done about 3 or 4 calls, if you've had no success, then I still think it's worthwhile doing that because they've not called you back already. So I would try option B first and not leave one, and then later down the line, look to leaving voicemails.
Awesome. David, anything you want to add there?
Yes, please. So Alex saved himself at the end there, in my opinion, by changing it to where it's a future step in the sequence. Because what I believe is that every communication channel, voicemail being one of them, is another branding impression, touch point, right? So make sure your messaging is on point, your voice message is clear and succinct, right? And there's a call to action within it. Again, more thought leadership available, plenty out there regarding the messaging, but ultimately, the prospects will not listen to 100% of the voice messages you don't leave, right? So if it's about probability odds, right, and stacking the deck in our favor, absolutely leave the voice message, in my opinion. But again, to Alex's point, maybe not on step 1 call, but like on call 2 or call 3 in the sequence.
I also want to add, I think some markets respond differently as well. I think from my experiences around sales and marketers, I think they actually quite like them a lot more than someone like a senior IT and security analyst. I think they respond very differently.
Definitely. And I like
That's
Max's
fair.
comment on the anonymous question. He said that you can also use the voicemail to set expectations about follow-up and other things that you'll be doing after. So even if you don't expect them to respond to the voicemail, you can say, I will be reaching out again, or stay tuned for an email from me. So good expectation setting there. Lots more questions coming in. I think we have about time for about 4 to 5 more minutes of these. So Tim from Flytix is asking, can you share any insights on productivity metrics? Are you going for quality or quantity? What's your ticket size and how many meetings is each BDR expected to produce? Who wants to take this on first?
I don't mind, I'll take it. So
Okay.
So productivity metrics is really about, I separate it into automation and manual touch points that the BDR is conducting. So a lot of the things around the emails tend to be more automated, but you can record the manual ones that they do too. And likewise with the calls is a good sort of benchmark, and the social outreach along that. And then in terms of quantity over quality, right? So using the automation tools is good for sort of maximizing out the quality in a more quantitative way. But quality is definitely the way to go. You don't want to waste your efforts doing that, right? But using the automation tools that are available to us, it allows you to thanks, David. But that allows you to be more personable without having to put too much of your time into that. And then that time that you're saving there allows you to start your campaigns a lot better by investigating companies or investigating what's working and what's not working. And therefore, you can really research the customers you're trying to reach out to. So that's where the quality comes behind, and then the quantity side is just where you're putting that data and then who's hitting the button send.
Awesome. David?
Well, I feel that I may be able to add more quantity to that answer. I cannot increase on the quality. Thank you, Alex. We'll move along to the next question.
Awesome. I loved that. That was very punny. At crunch time, favorite question to ask the prospect to prize the real reason why they aren't buying. What do you guys think about that? Why aren't you buying? Is that a good question to ask prospects? David,
Absolutely.
what do you think?
It's Alex. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so it's absolutely a great question to ask. You know, they're either going to answer it or they're not. But that is part of what I was saying earlier about that sort of negative signals that you can track, is finding out what is the reasons why people aren't buying, and is it because it doesn't offer something more to add that value, and therefore that could be an internal business product change, and you may want to launch something a little bit different or better, or could it be that it's just wrong timing in the market, or could it be entirely the wrong market that even marketing are targeting? So you can only, the question I always ask at the end is, that's no problem at all, because you can't force someone to buy something from you. But it's always good, just out of curiosity, I'm always looking for feedback, but what is it that didn't interest you, or what is it that's not available here that you wouldn't be interested in? Because knowing that their role is a certain kind and this is relevant to that, then if something's not adding up there, then there's a key reason why, and it's really good to make sure you get that as a last step. And then you can take that information, and it could be just, don't worry, it's just, it doesn't fall into my category. Then you know that's the wrong person and you can contact someone else. Or it could be that this is just not something we're interested in right now. Fine, park it up and then come to it again at another time, whether it's 3, 4, or 6 months down the line. So yeah, it's definitely a great question to ask. It's just how you ask it. Obviously, if some people are already a little bit frustrated, you don't want to frustrate them even more. But 9 times out of 10, I've always found that it's not a bad question to ask, and they either hang up or they'll give you an answer, and one or two things will happen.
Awesome. I know we only have a couple minutes left. One question I want to ask that I know David wanted to touch on is how to best leverage open rates.
Yep. So there are obviously several ways to approach this, but as far as leveraging open rates from a engagement platform or a sequencing tool perspective, is to leverage functionality within the tool and platform that reads open rates and then can automate or assist a nudge to automate a task assigned to a user to follow up or move that prospect to a new sequence, right? So for our team and internal processes, when a prospect opens up an email 4 or more times, then we allow the system to automatically move the prospect from sequence A to sequence B with more direct call to action, more direct, clear, and succinct messaging. You know, we're even a little tongue in cheek and like, hey, I see you're opening our emails. You want to book a meeting, right? So definitely leverage that as one of your easiest engagement data is some of the best intent data that's out there, right? So opens is one of the key metrics for intent data.
Alex, anything you want to add there?
No, I totally agree with you, David. You're absolutely right. And having the functionalities and platforms to someone's doing X activity, therefore we want to prompt them to a more call to action sequence from a BDR or SDR's perspective is absolutely right. But also, you know, if they're opening, are they clicking? And then if they're clicking, you know, what's that next step? Is that an attendee webinar or is it a meeting? You know, what are you trying to do? And if they're not clicking but they're opening, then is there a disconnect there, and how can you improve that? And likewise, there are also other platforms out there that will, the more someone opens, you know, the more information you probably want to tailor towards them. But if somebody's not opening, then you probably may want to look at other channels of way of contacting out to them. So looking at the open rates as opening, but also looking at the people that aren't opening and therefore tailoring or changing your direction or approach to them.
Awesome. Thanks for that perspective, Alex. So I know that there's a couple anonymous attendee questions being asked. If you don't want to associate your name with this question, that's totally okay. Go ahead and reach out to Alex or David on LinkedIn. I dropped their URLs in the chat and asked them one-on-one. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to answer. And with that, I want to head into our panelist takeaways. So David and Alex, tweet length takeaway. What do you want people to take away from today's conversation? David, why don't you go first?
Yep. So, you know, ultimately, the key takeaway in terms of signals and it being like dating, kind of going back to the meaning of the meeting, is that you need to analyze everything, assess where you are, audit where you're at, analyze everything, rinse, wash, repeat, right? So, you know, because there are so many nuances for each and all of us, based on what our offerings are and or who we're targeting, the best thing that we can do to be prepared is to, you know, assess current state and then, you know, get really granular in some of the analysis, sure, once you've established enough foundation. But don't get ahead of yourself and don't get stuck and trapped in analysis paralysis.
I love that. Analysis paralysis is something that I think everyone combats. There's too much data. Alex, what's your perspective?
So I think if there's anything you should take away from today, it's implement some sort of sales enablement or social selling automation tool. If you don't already have something in play, that will get you on, you know, hit the ground running with some stats and some data that will help you move forward. If you do already have one installed, you know, are you really using it to its full capability, or did you just set up some basic sequences that really aren't fully maximizing out the data that you're generating from marketing, but also giving your sales teams a full capability in their outreaching efforts and making them successful? So those are the two things that I would recommend.
I think that's something everyone combats with. Like, I know I can speak to the MSP team as we have a sales enablement tool, but we use it for event invitations, obviously. And we are definitely not using it to its fullest capability. And I think that every organization, no matter who you are, there's technology that you are not using to your fullest capability. So
and then modernizing at an exponential rate. There's new features coming out so quickly, so frequently. But you know, it's the little things like those features that can make the biggest of differences. And so keeping on top of that can be quite hard. But having that planned into your business strategy every quarter at least, would be something I'd highly recommend.
Definitely. With that, I want to say a huge thank you to David and Alex for participating in today's panel. I know you guys brought a lot of awesome content. And then another huge thank you to Outplay for making this event possible and sponsoring today's session. I dropped their link in the chat in case anyone wants to check them out. But thanks again and hope to see everyone soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Alex. You guys are rock stars.
Thank you, David. Thanks, Hannah.